capitalism is on the rise in America as transnational companies are announcing ESG goals as part of their corporate strategy. ESG stands for environmental, social, and corporate governance. It embraces so-called green agenda, build back better, the World Economic Forum's Great Reset, and similar ideas to transform our society. Not too many people actually know what it means and what ESG really stands for. So to talk more about this, I want to bring in Dr. Bonner Cohen. He's a senior fellow and environmental expert at the National Center for Public Policy Research. Dr. Cohen, thank you so much for being here with us.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Of course. So what exactly is ESG and why are government officials and corporate executives embracing it?
Well, government officials and corporate executives, at least some of them, are enthusiastically embracing this. The government is intent upon increasing its power, and the corporate entities involved in this, many of them on Wall Street, but they can also be found elsewhere, are determined to project to the world an image of caring about humanity, but they're also at the same time very interested in cashing in on the policies that would result from the collusion between the government and the corporations, most of them on Wall Street, as we find ourselves in the midst of what President Biden has referred to as an incredible transition to a green economy. Now, that transition will, in fact, be very incredible, but it won't be incredible in the ways in which the government claims it will be.
Right. So it appears that the Biden administration plans to increase surveillance of private businesses with its climate-related risks and climate disclosures. So that's not a free market. What's the future that they want for us?
The future that they want is a future that they determine for us. This is all part of an elaborate scheme to impose the government's will on people throughout the United States, whether that happens directly through corporate by influencing corporate behavior, telling the companies what they can and what they cannot do. And by doing this, you can transform the United States from what it was, or we all thought it was, to this green utopia of the future. Now, how do you do this? Well, you come up with corporate codes of conduct. For instance, you mentioned reporting requirements. The Biden administration has put forth a proposal in the form of a rule, which, if adopted, will have the force of law behind it, that would require companies to make climate-related disclosures. These are companies that are public companies regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, and they must report to the SEC all of their activities that in any way, shape, or form affect the climate. Well, what this means is that anything that they are caught doing, that the powers that be in Washington, D.C. have determined will have an adverse effect on the climate, then those activities will gradually be brought to the public's attention. The companies will be shamed, but they will also be fined and thus forced to change their behavior.
So, Dr. Cohen, you bring up a good point. So not everyone can afford, let's say, an electric car or solar panels for their homes. Small and medium-sized businesses, they can't afford to comply with ESG standards. So does this mean large monopolies will become even larger while everybody else will become poor?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The average price of an electric vehicle, an EV, is currently $66,000. Now, ask yourself, how many of our viewers have a spare $66,000 lying around that they can put into their individual transportation? This is a game that will enrich those who are already rich at the expense of those in middle incomes and points down. This is a very regressive scheme. It will line the pockets of those companies that can afford and investors that can afford to spend that kind of money on all of these green policies. But your average family in the United States cannot do so. And I'll be quite honest about this. I think a lot of the people behind this know that. I think one of the reasons they want to make automobiles more expensive and force feed us a diet of electric vehicles is that they know ultimately a lot of people are not going to be able to afford that, and thus will become dependent on the government for their means of personal transportation, meaning public transit,
Right.
which is not going to work very well in West Texas or Wyoming or Montana or in any other rural area in the country.
Dr. Cohen, is it fair to say that ESG advances the Great Reset, meaning in the year 2030 you will own nothing and you'll just be happy about it?
Oh, yeah, well, I don't know how happy you're going to be,
But that's what they
and you
want.
may own a few things, but your life is going to be transformed. Once the environmental movement recognized that the potential of scaring people to death about quote unquote climate change and realize the potential of what it means to get control of energy. Once you control energy, you also control the people who use and need energy. This is a way of forcing them to do exactly what you want to do and will enable unelected and unaccountable bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., and for that matter, around the world, to determine how you spend your life, how you spend your money, how you use your energy to the benefit of a tiny percentage of the population, which will, or at least they think they will, benefit from supplying us with electricity from, well, wind turbines and solar panels. Now, wind turbines and solar panels, heavily subsidized by the U.S. taxpayers today, will never power the United States. Not in the least. We can't have an industrial economy. We can't do all the incredible things that high technology enables us to do without electricity.
Right.
And that electricity cannot come from intermittent wind and solar.
Right.
That is why this transition is going to be a transition to utter chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Dr. Cohen with the National Center for Public Policy Research, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm sure this is a topic we will continue to cover here. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Still